Military veterans who experience combat trauma are at a higher risk of suicide than others who experience post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Across the country, an average of 20 veterans per day take their own lives. That's more than 7,000 per year. Where can veterans get help? How do friends and loved ones recognize the symptoms? Can the government do more? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawai'i start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawai'i. I'm Yenji Denise. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, affects many people for varying reasons. Tonight, we're going to focus on military veterans, people who have experienced a traumatic event such as combat while serving our country. What are the symptoms and what are the treatment options? What should we all know to help prevent an all too common outcome, suicide? With us tonight are experts who will share their expertise and experiences with us about veterans and PTSD. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guest. Tom Fratinardo is a veterans advocate. He served 10 years in the U.S. Marine Corps and saw combat in the Middle East. He is a retired Hawaii County police officer and a radio talk show host. Suzannes Kamaluhia Woolley is a Hawaiian cultural and healing arts practitioner. Her husband was a veteran of Desert Storm who committed suicide earlier this year after suffering from PTSD and mental illness. Felipe Salas is a psychotherapist at the Hilo Veterans Center. He was born and raised on the Big Island and served in the U.S. Marine Corps, spending 1 year in Vietnam as a helicopter crew chief. And Dr. James Spira is a licensed psychologist in private practice. His patients include primarily members of the military, veterans, and their families. Before we start, we want to share this phone number with our audience tonight. It's the number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. We will put this up again near the end of our program tonight. Thank you all for being here. I know this is a very tough topic, but one that needs to be addressed, so we really appreciate all of you being here. Doctor, I want to start with you so we're all on the same page. What is PTSD?
Well, PTSD actually is a diagnostic category that tries to help us understand and be able to therefore treat people who have had a life-threatening experience, either themselves or they witnessed a life-threatening experience, or there was some horrible incident that threatened their integrity, such as a sexual attack as well. The results are really in 4 categories. The first is that they have hyperarousal. They get easily startled, nightmares, react very quickly, racing heart rate, all the adrenalized things that often happen during an attack itself. Second category is reoccurrence of thoughts or feelings that have anything to do with the incident that occurred initially. That could be, I'm trying to do my work, I'm typing at the computer, but thoughts keep coming in, or I come across a word or a phrase, or I hear a sound outside like a helicopter or the screech of tires that just sends me back into thinking or feeling these horrible experiences that we felt initially. Avoidance is really the hallmark of PTSD. From having these horrible life-threatening experiences that end up being so scary, we'd rather not think about those or feel those. So people will often self-medicate with alcohol, drugs. They'll do high-risk activity, driving fast, do other activities to try and just avoid, not deal with things, often just hide in one's house and not go out. And the last category is more negative symptoms like depression, a low-grade constant depression, a lack of feeling intimate, feeling joy, feeling interested in things I used to. And the last aspect is we need to distinguish between post-traumatic stress, which pretty much any warfighter in this context would have. Going to war is the most intense experience of someone's life, usually. So we expect that they won't sleep well coming back, that they'll be a little jumpy, a little rough around the edges. But it becomes a disorder when it ends up with dysfunction in work, relationships, quality of life. Okay. So having been exposed to a life-threatening situation or a loved one exposed to that, having disruption in one's symptoms such that I can't function nearly as well as I should.
Suzanne, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and we know that this must be very difficult, so our condolences are here for you tonight. Please tell us about your husband.
Oh, well, Lieutenant Commander Chet Woolley. He served in the U.S. Navy in Special Warfare, Special Operations. He was a naval officer, Navy diver. He served at Annapolis and was a lacrosse player for the U.S. Naval Academy. He served several years in the U.S. Navy, and he was stationed at Pearl Harbor. He was a lieutenant commander, and he served active, and he served in the reserves as well. He had exposure to certain things in the military. He was special operations that maybe I can't share with you, but I would like to share some things with you. I think that with Chet's mental disorder, what he didn't know that he had when he was in the military, and certain things that he was exposed to maybe sparked it or caused, I don't know what came first, the PTSD or the mental disorder, or the PTSD caused the bipolar, or the bipolar caused the PTSD. So that would be a question for a doctor. But from my experience, I felt that he had layers of trauma, layers of experience, layers of being exposed to stress, being exposed to special warfare, and being exposed to certain burdens of the world and physical ailments, everything, all of the above, mental, spiritual, physical, that were layered on top of him, that he was carrying, like he was carrying the burden of the world, still serving, still marching, still doing his service and honoring his country and his family and his word and his truth. But I feel that he maybe didn't have that outlet to express himself. Maybe he didn't really want to be in warfare. He was more of a healer. Thank you.
Thank you. Felipe, tell us, who are the people who are coming to see you in Hilo? What's the profile of someone who is suffering from PTSD?
Well, a lot of them now are younger, guys coming out of Iraq, Afghanistan. We still have a good number of the Vietnam vets, but yeah, we're getting a lot more influx on the younger guys. The profile, the diagnosis, the way we look at post-traumatic stress, whether it's post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the ways that we look and sort of want to convey to these guys in terms of what they're experiencing with this type of post-traumatic stress is that they're normal. They've been to war, and they're back home now, and we can look at them and say they're dysfunctional, they're causing problems, or whatever you have, but if we took those guys and put them back where they came from, they're fine. So they're normal, but their norm in Hilo going to create some trouble, some suffering. So I like to look at it in terms of, and look at them as they're normal. They don't have a problem, but they can cause problems. And it's about them being aware that this is what's happening and the reason it's happening. And there's basically nothing that's either wrong, bad, or broken about them. They're whole. It's just that they've had these experiences and they see the world differently and they react to things differently. And it's important that they become aware of this so that then they can, I'm not there to change them. I'm not there to fix them. I'm not there to help them solve their problems. I'm there to help them become aware of what's going on in their lives and clear about the type of things they're saying, how they see it, so that then they can make better choices, better decisions.
Tom, I know you're a veterans advocate. Tell us a little bit about how you became a veterans advocate, and in the population that you're working with, do people recognize that they have PTSD? How does that process work?
Well, after retiring, I was able to become I'm a lifetime member of Disabled American Veterans. I was able to attend some training for veterans advocacy work, so a veteran service officer to assist veterans with filing their claims to the VA, Veterans Affairs. So throughout my discussions with people, you can just understand, well, one veteran knows what another combat veteran is going through. For me, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I wanted to identify with another group of people as a team, so I went straight into the police department. And that was kind of a Band-Aid for me, for my combat experience, but it was like I wanted to keep my juices and my mojo going. It was just constantly being at an operational level in the Marine Corps. Now you can apply that to the police department. So through that experience, it's helped me to, like, my first experience at the VA was back in '97. I actually reached out to Felipe. So Felipe is my therapist, if you will, and he's been there as a therapist for me whenever I've needed him for any sort of sleep disorder I might be going through, or just someone to talk to if I was having a problem with just coping. He's always been there for me, and I hope he remains there for a while for me. But through the VSO program, through DAV, it's helping you get people into the system. And right now, I think the VA is so overwhelmed right now. They don't have enough counselors there to assist and to screen and to get people into the system, which I think is leading to a lot of these suicides. So nationwide, I know I'm going off your question a little bit.
That's okay.
Nationwide, the demographic is the 50 to 74-year-olds that are committing suicide. So that demographic has been leading for maybe the last 6 or 7 years. Now it's going to where Felipe is talking, from the 18 to 34-year-old demographic. So where it was 30.5 suicides per 100,000 for my age, 50 to 74, it's dropped to 30.1, but they still say in the VA that there are 20 a day on average. And if it's dropping, why is it increasing? So they're saying it's dropping, but it's not. So 20 lives a day times 365 days is 7,300 lives a day that we're losing. It's not dropping.
Tom brings up a good point, and that is resources. Are there adequate resources for veterans here in Hawaii who need that help?
I can only talk about Hilo and maybe on the Kona side in terms of what we do in the Vet Center. And we serve our catchment areas quite well, and we have the adequate staff for that. And if we ever required any more staffing, if the numbers became larger, we have access to getting more people on board. Now that's on what we call the Vet Center side. And on the VA side, that's a different story.
Okay.
That's a different story.
We have calls coming in already, and of course we welcome you to join our discussion. That's what makes Insight so special. Dr. Lloyd in Waialae wants to know, what is the incidence of PTSD who serve in theater but do not see combat?
Lower, but nonetheless is present. Being in a life-threatening situation, even if you're not taking or giving fire, still can lead to PTSD. There's a range of combat exposure. You could be driving a Humvee down the road, you could be in a convoy, and be afraid that you're going to hit an IED at any moment. I've had many people feel relieved when they finally get blown up. They go, I knew it was my time, finally it got hit. So just being in theater, they talk about inside the wire, outside the wire. Inside the wire, you're getting grenades, rocket-propelled grenades, mortars thrown in at you at any time, or could be thrown in. Going on convoys, even if you don't hit an IED, you could hit an IED. You could be ambushed. So the threat, nonetheless, raises the stress level and the sensitivity to getting it. But there's other types of PTSD that can occur as well. There can be military sexual trauma to males or females that isn't directly combat related, but because you're in a combat environment, the victim is reluctant to bring it to their command. And anyway, the command is often, unfortunately, involved in either covering it up, or it might be your senior non-commissioned officer that was the perpetrator. So there's a lot of other types of incidents that can lead to PTSD, training accidents and other things as well.
What kind of resources was your husband able to access? Do you feel like he got help?
I feel like he received help from the VA, and they did the best that they could from a Western pharmaceutical point where I feel that he wanted to go natural and didn't want to be addicted to opioids and being on pharmaceuticals. So we went the route of Ayurvedic medicine and tried to heal him in a way of changing his food, changing his diet, changing his environment. So changing your environment, surrounding him with support and love, I think that really helps support somebody that has PTSD and help bringing down the triggers and the anxiety. Big crowds, big, rowdy, local fights, that kind of stuff is not a place for this guy to be. Big football games, big crowds, it's just, he'll wait in the car or he'll go home. The resources I feel that the VA had offered him were okay, except for the labeling part. The labeling part, he really had an issue with that. That created PTSD and triggered him. So it was like, walking on eggshells a little bit. It was, okay, are you okay? Can we go here? Would you like to go home? Just being, the loving wife that I was just always like, trying to get him off of, the subject of like, okay, I have PTSD, I have mental disorder, I'm bipolar, labeling himself. He labeled himself because the military labeled him. So I was trying to steer him away from being labeled. So through the VA administration, he was able to receive a psych doctor. He had psychiatrists that he went through for years. It went from this one, and then another one came out and through another one. And then I think he received well at the VA. I'm not going to put it down because that's where he went to. That was his home. That was where he checked in. That's where he was checked. And it kept him on the train.
When the doctor talks about those 4 areas of PTSD, do you recognize your husband in the symptoms that he laid out?
Oh, sure. He was, some of it had to do with the military. Some of it had to do with how he was treated by the VA, or assumed of him being labeled because he's bipolar or because he has a mental disorder. He's, this kind of guy. So I'm going to say, okay, he's got symptoms. He has symptoms that are in his body. Maybe it's like he's making it up. It's in his brain. So he was afraid to say what was really going on because they were going to label him and say, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to him because he's bipolar. No, it's a real issue. Like we were talking about earlier about his layers of PTSD. There's PTSD of being accepted, PTSD of being left on the side by the military, there's PTSD of not being accepted, there's PTSD from not having his self-worth, there's PTSD from, not necessarily combat issues like Doc was talking about, James. Maybe it wasn't just only in the combat. It was maybe because he didn't get his ranking and he was labeled because he was telling the truth about something.
If I can add something to what Suzanne's saying is,
Yeah.
I've spoken to a lot of veterans, especially on my radio program, where they're self-identifying. They're afraid that if they, and a lot of these people are gun owners, and that's an issue for some of these veterans. A lot of veterans own guns. So if they check themselves in to a VA facility and say, hey, I have PTSD, and I'm not talking about the vet center, I'm talking about going to see a psychologist or psychiatrist. The first question that the doctor there will ask is, do you feel suicidal today? And do you have guns in the home? So they don't want to be labeled as having post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's a fear that a lot of veterans have out there because of the stigma. And we were talking earlier about that stigma where we need to naturalize this disorder like any other illness. So the person has mental illnesses or emotional illnesses. We need to be able to have people like Felipe, people like Dr. Spira, treat these people and not be ashamed of their disorder. And it's a disorder. It's something that happened when they're in the military. So we need to give honor to what's happening to these people in the military and treat them with that respect, not as mental health risks.
And Tom, if I may, you're pointing out stigma, and I want to reinforce the importance of that. Because if it were not for stigma, people would be coming in more to get help.
Thank you.
And we know from all our research that 75% of people that go through PTSD treatment get substantially better. Half of those don't even have the diagnosis of PTSD after treatment. Trouble is, there's stigma around mental health in general. There's stigma around mental health, especially in the military. And when you have someone that's an academy grad, that's done at least 10 years and is a middle to high-ranking officer and is special forces, the stigma is something we can't even understand. The transition to civilian life, the transition to being a wounded warrior is really antithetical to their whole way of thinking. So to be able to get help, to go to a place where there would be help, is a huge hurdle for military veterans to start with. And then to be able to accept that I need assistance, that I have the strength in me from my military career, I know that I can overcome and adapt, and I have to be able to apply those good skills to myself. The stigma is not just perceived external, it's also internal.
Sure, and what I hear a lot of veterans tell me at coffee is, one, they want to be made whole again. And they're damaged goods, but they don't want to share it with the VA because they're afraid that they're going to be stigmatized, like Jim is saying. And it takes, you know, if you want to get well, if you don't want to, if you want your, because it just doesn't affect yourself, it affects your family. Your family will become victims of PTSD. All your children will have it, your wife will get it. So that's what we would like to get that point across today is, you know, just don't make, by making yourself well and seeking help, you're going to make your whole family unit, your whole ohana well.
When someone comes to you for help, when the doctor's talking about success, how do you measure success in this case? How do you know someone is getting better?
The people around them get better. That's probably the biggest thing. You know, one of the things about post-traumatic stress that I think doesn't get looked at, you know, if a person goes out and has a car accident, they very easily can get post-traumatic stress over that. You know, they'll be afraid to get in the car again. They'll not sleep well. They'll avoid anything that might replicate what they experienced. What people don't think about is that when a person goes into combat and they experience their first trauma, they don't get to say, I don't want to go back. I don't want to do this anymore. If they do, their military career is done. They're out of there. These guys buckle up, strap on, go out and do it again and again and again and again. And this becomes normal. And enduring this trauma is normal. So like I said earlier, when they come home, they are normal. They're not, I don't see them as broken. I don't see them as not being whole. They are whole. They may think, but all they're thinking about in terms of the labeling and whatever is they're taking other people's ideas, internalizing them, and then believing them. And then I ask them, I say, you know, you don't talk to people because you say they don't understand, they don't know because they weren't there. And yet you believe what they tell you about you. What's that all about? That's not you, and yet you're believing them. What makes you want to believe them? And go through that dialogue to create a sense of self-awareness so that for me, it's about getting them to look at the VA can do, even with its limitations, still a lot for veterans. What do you want to do? What are you going to contribute to your care? Because if you don't, it's going to continue to be a struggle. It will. It won't get any better than it is. And if people think that PTSD or post-traumatic stress is something that can be cured, can be healed, they're dreaming. Watch during Veterans Day when they show these World War II vets that are those that are still alive, and watch them talk about their experiences. It's like it happened yesterday. Mm-hmm. It does not go away. Mm-hmm. It won't.
To your point, we have a public service announcement from the VA, and we'd like to share that with you now.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good. But I have a story, and I don't know where to start.
I'm good. But I feel alone in a crowd.
I'm good.
but nobody understands.
I'm good, but the past keeps coming back.
But I can't get out of bed.
And I can't sleep.
I'm good, but I feel overwhelmed.
I'm good, but I don't feel safe.
But I don't even know who I am anymore.
But I still have nightmares. But I don't need any help.
I'm good, but I don't feel anything anymore.
I'm good, but I can't live like this anymore.
I'm really not so good. But are you ready to listen?
That's a pretty sobering public service announcement there from the Veterans Administration. And, you know, when they say they're good but they're not, how do you know that someone is not good?
Especially Marines. I was a psychologist at Naval Medical Center treating Marines for 10 years, and then I was director of the National Center for PTSD for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Every Marine, every Ranger, every SEAL, every combatant, when I say, so how are things going? I'm good. Things are fine, sir, right? That's their go-to statement. That's what they were trained to do. If you're an NFL quarterback, you're getting out there, you twist your ankle, you ignore it, you make the play. Even more important than that is your buddy's life is on the line, your life is on the line. When you're out there, it's real. You suppress any little feeling of pain or hurt, emotional or physical. So when you come back home, and what was normal there is not anymore normal here, right? You're acting in a natural way that anybody would react, but it just doesn't fit. And you get confused. You still have that go-to, I'm fine, sir, I'm fine, ma'am. But underneath, as they said, it's chaos inside. It's confusing. There's this dual aspect. On the one hand, I'm that hard-charging soldier, sailor, Marine, airman. But inside, I feel like I'm not the person I used to be. So I'm now depressed. I'm anxious. I feel worthless because I can't do what I did. That's why it's so great when you get counselors like these guys and advocates that understand what they're going through, to be able to connect at that level. I get it. You're good. But not everything's good. How's your sleep? Is your thoughts always racing? Is it hard for you to concentrate? You get rapport on what's not going good, and they admit it. But you can't stay there because they do have a lot of good qualities. Her husband was at least in 10 years to get to be an 04 SEAL, plus all those years in the academy. He had a lot going for him. You rely on these strengths, you utilize them, and you take them by the hand and you help them focus on what's not going good.
You know, one of the terms that we use as veterans, combat veterans, is if we're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, is one of the words, I'm sure they've heard it before, is they feel stuck. How do you get beyond the stuck point? And it can be tough because you've got to figure it out. But the VA does offer programs that will help you figure it out, like CPT training. But it's about your behavior. You've got to change your behavior. And like Felipe was saying, you can't be listening to other people. You know, listen to your therapist and just listen to what's going on in yourself. And you've got to push forward, right? So military is always about taking the objective. So you just got to push forward and push through it.
May I add to that, Tom, please?
Sure.
Another thing I wanted to share with you, I wanted to touch on this subject, is connecting to others that had served, connecting to others that were a band of brothers, connecting to others that have the same kind of exposure, not necessarily serving in the same unit, but somebody that can share, they can share their story and open up to each other. I felt that when he did speak, my husband Chet, when he did speak to Tom or whatnot and other folks that were in the military, he opened up more. He felt like when he was around civilians, he couldn't really share. And he was, you know, absolutely brilliant and just a genius. But when it came to certain things about world issues and what's going on in the world and whatnot, it was just, you know, it was just too much for him. So connecting with others that are in the service, having a group that he could go and speak to, or even connecting with the community and being involved in serving and helping other people. Like I felt that my husband Chet would have been a great VSO or somebody that could have been in serving, volunteering in the vet center. I just wish we could have gotten him in there. You know, he would have done so much. He always wanted to help. With knowing, being empathetic and compassionate to other veterans and other folks that were in the military, you know, and folks that were worse off than him, that lost limbs. He really felt like, oh gosh, you know, I have it bad, but you know, wow, that guy, you know, he was a paratrooper and fell out of a helicopter. And
well, that's the thing.
walk.
That's the thing, though, too. Though,
Right?
and I want to make this clear again: is that having PTSD is not a sign of weakness, and in these macho combat roles that we serve in, no pain, no gain, don't complain. You're human beings, and human beings break. So your brain can break, just like your bone can break, or you can have a heart attack. Your brain, the stress that, or the compounds that your brain produces can make you sick, can make you ill, and you've got to be able to talk it out, talk it through, like Suzanne was saying.
We have a question from Sherry on Kauai, and she wants to know, what does the VA do to help families of PTSD patients? Do you feel like there are resources that you were able to access?
That's a really good question. When this all went down and he passed, my first thing was like, it was like survival mode. What am I supposed to do? Who do I call? What's the recourse? What do I do? So I ended up calling his psych doctor, ended up calling hospice, you know, because I have little children that are involved that they don't know where their daddy is. They couldn't even believe it when it happened, and they still think he was alive and thought it was a joke, which is really hard. And it just had to be separated, and they had to have a little counseling and acclimation to what had just happened. So I would say hospice was really good. I believe there's another establishment called TAPS. It's tragedy assessment, TAPS.org, TAPS.org. I think that would be a good resource. I didn't tap into that. I didn't tap into TAPS. I've had an outpouring volunteer from all of the community. So I would say like the local church, you know, wherever you are, wherever you're a congregationalist or whatnot, go to the church. For the vet center was really good because I didn't know what I was supposed to do in filing things. There's all this other, you know, academics that I didn't know that I needed to study on, was Social Security and all these other benefits that I need to start applying for that I'm not versed in. I was like, what's the script? What do I do? So there is a veterans hotline, suicide hotline, that I did call. I let the VA know that my husband has passed, and they kind of coached me through it. So that was through VA. You know, I called the Veterans Administration, and they had a hotline, a suicide hotline. They led to somebody else, and then they led to somebody else, and eventually went to somebody local. So it would have been the vet center. It was the VA psych clinic, the Veterans Administration clinic, and folks in the community. That's just where I'm at right now. This is fresh. It's only 3 months now. So I'm still needing help. I don't know what I need help in, but I know I need help.
The VA doesn't cover families. And that's one aspect of the vet centers that we do. We don't not only cover the veteran, but we also see family members.
Right.
So they have access to services at the vet center.
Mental health services recently, just several years ago, started seeing spouses as well, not separately, but along with their veteran member. So there are some resources available, veteran medical centers throughout the country now. The providers are being trained in family support, spousal support as well. Is it enough? Absolutely not. Do we need more? Sure. But at least there's a beginning of appreciation of how valuable the family system is in the treatment of veterans with PTSD.
You know, there's a saying in the military, we don't leave anyone behind, especially the Marine Corps. You don't leave them behind. And even like we were sharing earlier, if there was an ambush that occurred, they would send more Marines out there to pull out, and more Marines or more military might die just to recover the remains. And we have a program in Hilo right now. There's an organization called Hawai'i Island Veterans Memorial.org, and it's led by Colonel Bob Williams. He's a retired Colonel Vietnam veteran, was out in the field for years in Vietnam. He came back and he was trying to find a way to serve. He served as a school counselor, a college counselor, and now he's serving the military. He's 80 years old, and he started this nonprofit to build a project in Hilo, right below the university, which is all the leasing's been done, the infrastructure's been put in. So now we're awaiting some response from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It's going to provide 91 units to veterans and their spouses that might not be able to afford somewhere to live. And there's a lot of homeless veterans in Hawaii. So there's a lot going on right now in Hilo as far as trying to support those veterans. And Hawai'i Island Veterans Memorial, Inc. is one of them.
In fact, there's the highest percentage nationwide of homeless veterans here.
Well, one of the questions that we did get tonight was about homeless veterans and what resources are available to them on this. I would just pose that to you.
Like they were saying earlier, it has to come from the community because that's where we live. You know, everyone depends on the VA so much. The VA has a bloated budget. They just got $201 billion this year, with $86 billion separately for discretionary spending. And if you go on to GAO.org, you're going to see all the high-risk investigations in the 5 high-risk areas that have been identified by the GAO regarding. And I'm not trying to knock the VA. My local VA in Hilo, my team, my medical team, and every other medical team in Hilo, they are awesome. They provide awesome service to the veterans that are in the system. But the other problem for the veterans are trying to get into the system via the veterans benefits side. So it's a silo. You have veterans benefits, you have veterans health, you have veterans administration. So it's very frustrating for these veterans that might be 60 years old, who I know of. I have a friend who had prostate cancer. He was in Vietnam. He was exposed to Agent Orange. For a 70-year-old man to go and apply for his veterans benefits, it's tough. He got them eventually, but there needs to be more people, I think, at that level coaching these people through and helping them out and not leaving one veteran behind.
There needs to be a lot more, absolutely, done for the veterans, a lot more resources. But what we have right now, we also have what's called the HUD-VASH program, Housing and Urban Development for the VA. There's an Office of Homeless Veterans at the VA in Honolulu right now that all the satellite offices for the VA know about and try and they do outreach where they try and locate these people, try and get them hooked into the system, let them know about resources that are available, such as housing for them. So there's an active effort. Again, is it enough? Absolutely not. We need more resources for that.
When I was in this program back in 2015, I sat here with the director for US Vets. They have an awesome nonprofit program, and they are trying to bring in and help as many veterans. And they've helped hundreds of veterans locally in Honolulu. And there just needs to be more. They use that as a template to have more organizations like that to help more veterans that Jim is referring to.
I want to get to some of these cards. Someone writing in anonymously says that he is a PTSD disabled veteran. He has a list here, and I'd actually like to read all of it just to give him a voice tonight. He says, many psychiatrists will not take Medicare. There's no VA hospital in Hawaii. I'm assuming he's talking about Hawai'i Island, or are we talking?
There's no VA hospital. They'll refer you to your individual CBOC, which is a community-based outpatient clinic, and now before they had choice, so they might farm you out for a medical reason out to a specialized person. But if the person's in the system and they're claiming they have PTSD, they can access a doctor.
And just to clarify, the VA here doesn't have an inpatient ward, but they collaborate with Tripler Army Medical Center for their 3B2 ward, which is an inpatient stay in case they feel suicidal and need a stay.
He also adds that Tripler's PTSD program mainly focuses on active duty soldiers. My current doctor even is having trouble finding someone to pick up his patients when he has moved to the mainland. The system needs to be improved. Many PTSD patients have trouble with social interaction, so just reaching out is hard enough. Fighting the system doesn't help. Certainly that, you know, you're talking about those barriers to entry. That's what he's talking about.
Well, I was speaking with an official with the VA this afternoon. Right now, there's about 54,000 veterans that are in the system in the Pacific region. And they're estimating there to be about 128,000 more. And this is Pacific-wide, Guam, Saipan, the Philippines. So those people, they're trying to be reached by the VA, but their advertising campaign was under scrutiny last year because there was a big leadership turnover in the VA. So the leaders on top, they weren't directing people to do what they needed to do. So you have all this budgeted money there, and they only spent about $54,000. This is in 2018 now, on PSAs. There wasn't much money that was spent on PSAs in 2018.
What do you think, though? How do we get people who, as this gentleman points out, have some difficulty interacting? How do we get them to see someone like you?
Well, one of the things that's involved here that I think may need a little attention to is a lot of those models that the VA devises in terms of how to help veterans are based on the mainland model. Mm-hmm. And they don't, I don't think, pay attention to the fact that we are an island state. Mm-hmm. And that creates other challenges to accessing resources. The other one is, and this comes across as my being a counselor, is the VA, post-traumatic stress in its genesis is sort of a, what I call, it's about powerlessness and helplessness. I experienced a trauma where, although I was armed, I was ready for combat, something became overwhelmingly threatening to me. And so out of that, a lot of anxiety, how can I fulfill this, fulfill that? Anyway, I'm challenged and I feel powerless and I feel helpless. So post-traumatic stress, and I go to the VA, and what does the VA do? What's the VA for? The VA is to give me. I want, I need, I have to have it. So what does the VA do in a sense? It enables post-traumatic stress. It enables that sense of powerlessness and helplessness. So for me, if I look at the veteran, I say, okay, what can you do for yourself? How can I get you to learn how to be empowered, how to make a choice, how to make some decision? Yeah, you may get no's out there. If there's a no, what do? Do you just get upset, throw everything away, screw the VA, don't do anything about it? No, you look for options. What are my options here? No is not necessarily just the end result. I can ask for options here if I have. But again, when you're dealing with post-traumatic stress, you're dealing with somebody who's in a very narrow zone and they're targeting. So the answer can be right here. But if I stay here, I'm not going to see it. I don't care how much you talk to me. It's not going to work until I get to a place where I can go, oh, okay, this can be another option. So for me, the whole process is about the how. How to get them to learn how to access care, how to learn how to take care of themselves, how to look at situations and see that it's not just that the only way. There can be options here. And that's a challenge.
And you're absolutely right. We need to combine having sufficient resources that work in this specific setting to enable them to learn these active coping skills to manage and hopefully even get beyond PTSD. So what the VA has been trying to do, and others as well, is reach out through telehealth. So we had a program, you participated in our program.
Great,
actually.
Worked really well.
Doing telehealth PTSD using a PTSD-specific therapy called cognitive processing therapy or exposure therapy. We reached out to Guam, Saipan, Samoa, all the different islands, Tahana, to areas that they couldn't come into community-based outpatient program or a vet center. We sent them tablets so they could have them. Now most people have these on their own. So there's different programs. We're trying to reach out. The Homeless Veteran Center is trying to actually go into the bush to find the homeless veterans. There's a number of programs, but once again, they're not enough, and we need to keep building on those, and we can't rely just on the VA. We need to have government programs reaching out as well and community programs reaching out equally.
Well, what I would encourage I put my family through hell with my anger. Don't be afraid to help your spouse if they have post-traumatic stress disorder. They might not even be aware that they have it. They might think, well, there's something wrong, but find a way to, every veteran with PTSD that doesn't know they have PTSD, they have triggers. Something's gonna bring maybe an incident that may have occurred in combat back. For me, it was always smelling diesel fuel or jet fuel. So just those things. So, but you have to go and talk to someone like Felipe to get that advice as far as, you know, that diesel fuel's not gonna, it didn't hurt you before you joined the military. So there's those triggers that people might have, but it's about peeling an onion. That onion, just the skin of that onion, just peeling it away, and you gotta work on it. You have to be self-aware, like Felipe was saying, but you gotta be responsible, because you're responsible for your own actions.
And on the issue of spouses, I would love to know what you would say to other men and women who might have a partner who's going through this. What can they learn from your experience?
Wow, where do I start? I think first of all and foremost is educate themselves. Kind of don't be oblivious, because for a while I just was kind of oblivious and would just say, oh, well, let's just go surf. Let's just go paddle. Let's, you know, I would take him and just kind of distract him and just share something positive with him. But then on the other hand, I was like, no, there's a real issue here. Would you like a massage? Can I make you some ava tea? Can I, you know, make you a bowl of soup? So just trying to support them. But don't say, oh, did you take your meds? Oh, did you do this? Because that right there will trigger them really bad. And it's like taking a knife and stabbing them. So you do have to learn some of the terminology of how to deal with it. First, you have to recognize it. Like what Tom was saying, is like, I don't even know sometimes he has PTSD. Is that PTSD? What is that? So I gotta, like, you know, Google whatever and whatnot. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's definitely PTSD.
Now, on you know, just a day-to-day level, what does that actually look like?
Basically, he'll maybe get something in the mail or something, and something will upset him, or he'll get a phone call, or one example was a muster letter he received from the military to come back and serve. And he was like, well, wait a second, I'm gonna go back and serve, but what does that entail? I gotta what? And I'm like, you know, 40 something, and I'm, you know, I've got children, and, you know, I'm 100% disabled. He went from 50% to 75% to 100% disabled. 100% disabled is like pretty much, you know, nobody's gonna hire you. You have to be on your own. And he received benefits, and he's able to stay home and take care of himself. That was his job, was to wake up every day, his routine, would eat his anti-inflammatories, whatever it was, to get the pain out. If he's on medication and he's eating food that's not copacetic to his body type, he starts getting inflamed. So inflammation in the body is shown through pain, anxiety, you know, irritability, you know, and whatnot, and then it leads to other things. So having a mental disorder, really have to be mindful of chemicals and things that you're putting in your body. So feeding your family member good food really will help. And also keeping them busy with something that they enjoy, some kind of craft, some kind of tooling in the yard, give them a job to do. They still want to serve, and they want to have their self-worth. They don't want to be that disabled person, or that person that nobody wants to talk to, or that person that can't be in a crowd. So as a family member, encouraging them, building them up, and loving them, and supporting them in a way that they feel safe. They don't feel safe, or they're living on fear. Past traumas and dramas keep being brought up, and they're reacting in the present from the past, and they're not letting it go. They're like a dog on a bone. They're like, I feel pain. I know I'm in pain. I have this. I have that. Well, here we are going back to the labeling again. So it's kind of like a child And you have to kind of like, you know, just love them and surround them and support them from all avenues. And even with my husband, Chet, having all the support that he had with his family, his friends, his close family members, and his canoe club, Keaukaha Canoe Club, he had all the support. He still felt that he had to leave this world. It was too much for him. Having to take care of his family. He was in an accident years ago. He was hit by a car and on a bicycle. This SUV hit him going 60 miles an hour in front of the Volcanoes National Park. He was hit the windshield, left for dead on the side of the road, and that person kept driving. So that was another trauma that was on top of the other trauma for him to feel like he was left for dead on the side of the road. He worked for years to try to get better, just couldn't get out of it, and that accident took away his capacity to take care of his family. And him serving now was leaving the legacy and helping his family. That accident wiped him out. So that wasn't in combat, but that was another thing that you were talking about, James, was they're not necessarily in combat. They can have PTSD going down the road or being mixed up at the local bar and something might trigger them and then they just poof and they just snap just like that.
And PTSD doesn't exist in isolation. Most combat veterans with PTSD have multiple head traumas, special warfare. Combatants have many, many concussions or subconcussive head blows that make it more difficult to tolerate stress. Emotions flow out easier. They get frustrated because they can't concentrate and remember things as well. They also have a lot of pain. Pain makes sleep harder, and if you don't sleep well, then again, your threshold for controlling your attention, controlling your emotions are harder. So we sometimes call it the 3P syndrome: pain, PTSD, and post-concussive symptoms, which he had. And many, many veterans have. Let me just add one thing to what you were saying so eloquently. In terms of what can a spouse do to help, what can family members do? We try and teach this Buddhist concept called mindfulness, to be non-reactive, have non-reactive awareness, to observe what's happening without clinging to it and getting frustrated about it, and without avoiding it and pushing it away. We try and be aware of it, tolerate it, and not react to it. That's for the patients. But the spouses need to do that as well, for their own mental health, but also if they can tolerate, understand, and not react to their patient spouses.
Don't take it personal, too.
And not take it personally.
Take it
just
personal.
be aware of it, but not react to it. They're modeling for the veteran how to move forward.
But if I may, real fast, and I'm really short on time, don't give up. If you're a veteran, you need help, go to the VA or seek out someone like a VSO, the State Department of Veterans Affairs. That's Colonel Ron Hahn. Or come to Hilo over by the Reserve Center. There are people there that are employed by the state to help you. For example, Mayor Kim on the Big Island, he's appointed the Hawaii Island Veterans Advisory Committee. They're out there looking to work for veterans. So don't give up, ask for help. Seek us out, we're there to help you.
There are also walk-in clinics.
Walk-in clinics.
At vet centers, at hospitals, and at the main Veterans Administration.
We just have a few minutes left, and so Felipe, I want to give you the last word tonight. For someone who does seek this help and who is able to come out on the other side, tell us about what it, let's end on a positive note. What are the changes that you can see?
On that last point about getting family involved, a lot of the veterans get a whole lot better when the family is more aware about what's going on with the veteran. And so we offer group spouses for counseling for the spouses. We have a group for the spouses or significant others, and them being aware of what the veteran is going through. It's a tremendous asset in terms of how the veteran then can do better. Without that, though, it's a struggle.
Right. And when you do see someone who go through this and are successful, tell us about what that's like.
We have. Well, it's largely from what I see out of our women that come into our groups. They're less confrontive. what we look at is what we call intensity, duration, frequency. So when a person is triggered, how intense does it get? How long does it last, and when it triggers again? So what we get to see is they'll get triggered, but it's not way up there. And then they become aware of it. Oh, this is me. This is what happened. Wife goes, yep. And they don't enable it. They don't get into it, and it comes back down, and then the frequency becomes less.
That is wonderful.
One last little punch here. One of the things that we consistently offer to veterans is a book called The 4 Agreements. It's really excellent in terms of looking at self-care and what this is all about.
Okay, and we have to leave it there. Before signing off, we want to again share this number with you tonight for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. Mahalo to you for joining us. And of course, we thank our guests, Tom Fratinardo, Veterans Advocate, Felipe Salas, psychotherapist at the Hilo Veterans Center, Suzanne Kamaluhia-Woolley, who shared her husband's story with us tonight, and Dr. James Spira, psychologist. Next week on Insights, the Ala Moana Park Master Plan. The city wants to revitalize the popular park, but not everyone agrees with the plan. Join us for what promises to be a spirited conversation. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.